last few years, I've used a diagram to explain the process of what exactly happens when you trade in an old belief for a new one. And what I'd like to do right now is to take this diagram and explain what spiritually happens when an old belief gives way to a new one. Now, as you take a look at the diagram, I want you to understand that one way to measure our spiritual maturity is by what we believe. Now, instead of thinking in terms of spiritual maturity being something like how much you know or what you do, consider your growth tied directly to how quickly your current beliefs die and get replaced by newer, ever-expanding, actually more powerful beliefs better suited to move your life forward. Now, let me further explain what I mean by referring again to this diagram. Notice that in the center, all of your intrinsic needs reside. Needs like love and acceptance and security and assurance and total commitment and more all reside right there in the center. These needs daily require that somehow we meet them. And as you go about doing so, you form a belief about how to fulfill them. As long as what you believe allows your needs to be met, you're in real good shape. But, as I alluded to before, one of God's measurements for maturity is the expansion of your belief system. So think about how more mature your beliefs are now than maybe 5, 10, or even 20 years ago. Now, if you're like most people, you enter the Christian life very idealistic with a set pattern or perhaps even a system to follow that promised to deliver you a deeper, more spiritual life. But as you live your life, many of those earlier beliefs lose the power they once possessed and need to be replaced by more mature beliefs. In fact, perhaps even less stringent and idealistic beliefs. These new beliefs serve as the foundation your future needs to stand on. So sometimes you might, like me, look back years ago to a belief that you held on to as so near and dear and just shake your head at how ill-suited that belief is for your current circumstance. It's not that the belief was wrong or that you were wrong for having held to it. But just like everything in life, your spiritual beliefs change as you change. So to believe as you did then was fine for back then, but for right now you need something larger, a belief more ready to take you where God is taking you. So the natural order of the Christian life is to replace the old beliefs with ever-enlarging beliefs that outgrow the need to hang on to the old. But as you can see by the illustration, this process requires you to pass through a time of uncertainty and unknown. So as a result of current belief, you behave and act in a certain way. You behave as you do because you believe that doing so meets your innermost needs. But what happens when what you do no longer meets your needs? When your behavior that you exhibit as a result of your beliefs maybe no longer works? Well, now you move into a crisis of belief and begin to doubt. And doubts as to your past or your future seem to always occur. To leave the crisis of belief, you have to give up your old belief and venture into risk and uncertainty. Now, in spiritual terms, risk and uncertainty means one thing, and that is walking by faith. You see, your faith only grows in proportion to your belief. When an outgrown belief no longer serves you, the only option left is for you to let go of it and walk by faith until you arrive at a new, more powerful belief. Now, since God is pleased when we walk by faith, then I guess we should really expect situations to come along that require us to move out of our comfort zone and into faith. And most of the time, these situations come as a result of the belief that we once held no longer being powerful enough to see us through our current situation. But ultimately, if we persevere in faith, we do indeed reach a new belief. And just like the concentric circles of a tree mark the growth of the tree, so too do the concentric circles of belief expansion mark the maturity of a spiritual life. So let me wrap this up by giving you a concrete example of what I mean. You enter into a relationship with God wanting Him to be pleased with you. Thus, at the center of the diagram, you place your need to be pleasing to God. You then create a belief that says, God is pleased with me when I'm performing for Him. Now, this in turn causes you to behave and act in ways that you deem pleasing to Him. Maybe activities like attending church or treating your family more nicely or perhaps even reading the Bible once in a while. But as long as you sense He's pleased with you, you'll continue to believe and act as you do. But eventually, all the behavior and activity that you partake in to gain God's acceptance no longer brings a sense of His acceptance. Well, and what does this mean? It means that what you believe about how to relate with God no longer meets your intrinsic need to be pleasing to Him. Now feeling like He's not pleased with you, you quickly move into a crisis of belief. Now at this point you have two options. Either you stay in the crisis by milking your need out of the old dying belief, or you press on in faith. It's surprising how many people opt to remain in the crisis. A prolonged crisis simply indicates your unwillingness to let yourself move into faith. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people who are in this position just hit the gas and make the ruts in their life even deeper. Caught between the present difficulty and the future uncertainty, they choose to simply live a life in the used to be. A crisis never comes at the right time, does it? That's why it's called a crisis. But I hope you see that the only way for spiritual growth to occur is for a crisis to sever you from your old beliefs so that you'll walk by faith. Now, in our example, a person walks by faith when he or she refuses to look for God's acceptance by how they feel or by what they do. And though in the absence of adversity, walking by faith sounds easy, nothing takes more courage and faith than standing up against lying emotions in the midst of overwhelming circumstances. But when you do, eventually you pass through the faith and gain a new belief, a belief that is more suited to you for your life moving forward. And again, in our example, that belief would be that you just simply don't have to work to please God, because in Christ, He's already pleased with you. Now, the truth found in this diagram explains a lot about the spiritual life. As I came to recognize this process happening repeatedly in my own life, I grew to view the crises as necessary agents to bring me my spiritual maturity. Instead of fighting adversity, I embraced it and saw that those situations that on the surface look to bring me harm actually do me a lot of good. So the process I've described in this video is just part of what it means to be human. You've experienced the process as I have, and down the road we both will probably do so again. We can read about men and women in history who have grappled with this same process, and certainly many people in the Bible have done it as well. And when our beliefs come under fire, God usually desires that we just let go of them in order to free us up to receive a new set of beliefs that He wants to give us. So just remember, it is God's intention to grow and not strangle your spiritual life. So when you know the purpose of a crisis is to take you into a deeper experience of faith, and that by walking in faith you eventually arrive at a more solid, mature belief, no amount of life's experience can ever go unused. Everything works for your benefit.